Factotum Industries wants to know if I have ever faced the fear of moving my shop. Well, if I had to move the shop, it would be a bear of a project, but I don't fear it. In fact, it's the reason that everything except for this workbench and the mill and the lathe are on wheels, is because I like the idea that this whole place is reconfigurable and that I could be out of here in a few hours if I had to be. He is saying his lease just ended after 10 years and his new lease collapsed the day before his relocation, so his entire life is going into a container for storage. How do you face obstacles like this? Yeah, when you make stuff for a living, there are going to be periods of time when you don't have access to the engine of possibility that is your shop. That has been tough. I used to live over in a San Francisco neighborhood called Sunnyside. It's one of the only times I moved out of the Mission District. And I spent 5 years in Sunnyside in the first house we had in San Francisco. And that house, I had a shop in that house that was the smallest shop I have ever had, actually smaller than the shop I had when I moved back in with my parents. This shop was 10 by 12 feet. It might have been 8 by 12 feet. I will try and scare up some pictures of it because it's spectacularly packed for what size it was. And it was a great little shop. Like, I really dug that shop. It served my needs back then quite well. I did most of the gunsmithing on my Blade Runner blaster in that shop over in Sunnyside. But when we moved in 2010 from there back here into the Mission, we had a garage we have a garage here, but the garage couldn't be my shop because you need your parking in the Mission. You don't give up your parking. You don't give up your parking in the Mission because that's mission critical. Double entendre. And so I remember at one point talking to my wife about it, and she said, look, the Mission's an industrial neighborhood, or at least it used to be. You ought to be able to find an industrial space near the house. Just start looking. And so I spent about 8 months without a shop space. I spent 8 months with all of my tools in storage and no shop space. And that was tough. But it was tough, but I knew what I was doing. Does that make sense? I took it as a this is what's happening sort of thing. On the flip side of that, when we made Savage Builds, speaking of everything here being on wheels, when we shot Savage Builds, which took 4.5 months at the beginning of 2019, I moved most of the key pieces of equipment and supplies from here to the set of Savage Builds. And sorry, just 1 second. We've just had a lot of rain. Oh, Maggie, sweetie, I'll be there in a few. We just had a lot of rain, and the resulting pollen bloom is kicking my ass. So we moved most of the equipment here to the set for Savage Builds, and that had this really intense effect upon me, which was I had a shop I was using every day, but I didn't have my self-soothing space at the end of the day or on weekends. So I would come in here on the weekends while filming Savage Builds, and there was nothing useful in this building for me. There were no power tools. There were no supplies. Like, all of the hardware store here went to the set. And I thought that was a great idea until I came in on the first weekend and realized that I literally could not screw a thing into a thing in this space. I know you're thinking to yourself, why didn't you leave yourself a drill or a complement of tools? And the answer is, that is what I did the following week. But still, like, during the shooting of Savage Builds, I was without a key way in which I soothe myself. That's one of the important things that happens in this shop. So I think that the advice I would have for you, if your stuff is going in to storage for a while, is to come up with, is there a minimum complement of tools that would allow you to get some work done while the bulk of the shop is in storage? That's my question. Is there a minimum complement that you could have in your space that you could, I don't know, whether it's some files or some carving tools or some, maybe you make some models. I don't know. It could go, you know what, I'm going to bring Maggie over here. Just a sec. All right, sweetie. Here, I'm going to ask you just to kind of hang. Oh, nope. Right up here. There you go. Right there is where you're hanging out. Thank you, sweetie. Thank you. Thanks for your patience. She is really not super freaked out, but this is non-standard. And she can't hear anymore, but she remembers that the shop is noisy, so she does not love it here. She'll be very relieved when we're leaving after this live stream. So, yes, I think that's my advice, is recognize that this is happening and prepare yourself for the long winter of not having access to your shop, and give yourself a complement of tools or a makerspace membership that you go to once a week or something like that to get that Jones out, because boy, I suffered when I didn't have any outlet during the period of time I was shooting Savage builds. David T has a question. Why do you use leather on your tool bench rather than a typical cutting mat or other surface? I love this question, and the answer is, well, I have typical cutting mats at my disposal here under the bench. There's no shortage of those, but I'm a storyteller. And one of the key ways I tell stories is through the objects I make. I'm about to do a shoot about the headpiece of the staff of Ra. Oh, that came loose. I'm about to do a shoot on the headpiece of the staff of Ra, and the thing that I love about making props is layering in the story, using the weathering and the tools and the tricks of my trade. And when I just thought about covering this workbench, I thought I wanted to cover it with a natural material because I wanted that surface to tell the story of the workbench. And it does. And it makes me so happy to see the story of all the work that I've done on this surface extant on the surface. So that's why I have a leather covering. I have cutting mats when I need them, but the leather covering, it pleases me. I also like the feel of leather. I like the way it deteriorates, and an old beat up cutting mat is just kind of sad to me. And then there's also what I will do with this after the fact, which is I think my current plan is when it's time to retire this, which frankly might be soon, I want to turn it into a full set of leather gladiator shoulder armor. That's my goal. That's my plan. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support us even further, you can by becoming a tested member. Details are, of course, below, but it includes all sorts of perks, and we're building them all the time. You get advanced word and behind-the-scenes photos of some of our projects. Questions, you get to ask direct questions during my live streams, and we have some members-only videos, including the Adam real-time series of unbroken, unedited shots of me working here in the shop. They are weirdly meditative. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you on the next one.